왜 집에 가고 싶은데?
딸이 있어요.
사람들은 네가 없어도 모를 거야.
South Korea. In a residential area of Seoul, one of the local workers orders a hooker for his pleasures, so the couple goes to his home.
차를 이렇게 되면 어떡해요?
괜찮아요. 금방 나올 건데요, 뭐.
But since then, the girl has not returned, and her car has turned into a veritable advertising dump, which soon attracted the attention of the police, who checked her license plate number. A strange man appeared next to her, and they asked him if it was his car, but he looked around and, realizing that no one was nearby, uttered only one sentence.
시발년 잡히면 죽는다.
He turned out to be a former police officer and now a pimp named Joong-ho, whose girls had started to disappear, which meant his income had dropped and he had to force his colleague to hand out even more flyers to attract a new audience. In the evening, an unexpected call came in asking for a girl to be sent to a hotel room, and Joong-ho immediately sent one of his last remaining workers. But in the room, where the man was already ready for action, the girl decided to wash up and found a second man behind the door, ready to film their intimate activities. Not wanting anything to do with perverts, the girl left the room, but for these words she was paid with a blow to the head. Joong-ho immediately rushes to the scene, watching his girlfriend leave, and for such antics, the pervert begins to get slapped by the business owner, which ultimately leads to a situation where the only way out is to negotiate for money. Sun-hee was smoking on the street at the time and noticed in the reflection of the glass how much her boss had received from the jerk. After this incident, she declared that she had had enough and was leaving this line of work. But as soon as she stepped outside, she recognized the car of her friend who had disappeared several months ago. Joong-ho found the car in a residential area but did not call the police because, in his opinion, they had simply received a good advance payment and decided to disappear. He did not believe the version that they had been kidnapped or something even worse. Therefore, Song-hee has no doubt that her boss is a real jerk and gets out of the car right on the road. Although he is shocked by such behavior, his partner immediately calls him and informs him that one of their clients has refused all the girls. They only have Min-jin left, but she is sick and refuses to go out. The girl really feels terrible, so much so that even her child helps her cope with her illness. But even these circumstances do not prevent Joong-ho, who was listed as trash in the girl's phone, from calling her and convincing her that she still needs to go to work. After the conversation, he drops his phone and finds his girlfriend's phone at his feet, who disappeared a couple of months ago. Min-jin was already waiting for her new client next to her red Matiz, while her boss brushed his teeth and waited for the found phone to charge. Looking through recent calls, he finds the number 48 to 85, which seems familiar to him. Even his partner says he knows this number. The guy always talks like an idiot, and after looking through the records, he realizes that all his girlfriends disappeared after this guy, which means that this person is selling his girls. Excited, Joong-ho immediately calls Min-jin and asks her not to show any signs of concern, and as soon as they enter the house, to immediately take a shower and give him the address of this jerk. If she messes up, she will die. Joong-ho, not intending to report this to the police, decides to teach the jerk a lesson himself. Only on his way home does he notice that the former prostitute's car is gone, but he continues to act as before. Joong-ho isn't entirely confident in his abilities, so he decides to play it safe and calls an old acquaintance from the police, Detective Lee, to enlist the support of his old friend. However, since Lee is busy protecting the mayor of Seoul, who is currently under attack, Joong-ho immediately drops down the priority list. Min-jin has already approached the house where terrible things are about to happen, so she tries not to show any signs of her presence and leaves the gate open just in case. In the yard, she notices a skinny and dirty dog sniffing the ground, and a shovel standing very suspiciously nearby. Joong-ho parks right behind them, and the girl asks to take a shower, from where she will try to send a message. Note that she will only try, because a little later it turns out that the windows in the house are bricked up, which means there is no connection inside. And when the girl starts to panic, she notices a piece of skin from the head of one of the previous victims, which the maniac did not notice when cleaning up. Deciding to keep her composure, she returns to the client and regretfully informs him that she has forgotten the condoms in the car. The man, of course, lets her go, but forgets to mention one condition. The door is locked and there is no way out. Joong-ho starts calling, but there is still no connection because the girl is already completely tied up and the attacker is already bringing tools to carry out his plan. He reminds her of the girls who disappeared earlier, one of whom he even cut out the tongue because she wouldn't stop screaming, so Min-jin decides to remain silent. Only when the maniac asks her why he should let her live does she immediately confess that she has a 7-year-old daughter who will be left alone, but even these words do not change the outcome.
사람 중에 네가 없을 머릴 거야.
He takes a chisel and tries to smash the girl's skull, but she dodges for so long that the maniac ends up hurting himself. This only angers him, and he simply hits her on the head with a hammer. After that, the doorbell rings. The guy immediately goes outside, where he finds an elderly couple who have decided to visit their old friend who has not been to church for a long time, but the guy quickly kicks them out and returns to the house. The old people noticed their friend's dog, which was so thin and dirty that the man suspected something was wrong and was about to leave, but the guy casually admitted that he had lied because the owner of the house was just sleeping, and if they went inside, they might wake him up. The old men, of course, fall for this, and when they go inside, the guy decides to teach them a lesson for daring to disturb him. Next, they had to get rid of their car, but who could have guessed that he would get into an accident and that it would be Chun-ho who, as it turns out, is responsible for the incident, so he asks the driver for his phone number to cover the insurance costs and not call the police, as he is very busy right now. The young man replies that everything is fine and he can drive away, but Chun-ho notices blood on his shirt and suspects the guy of being involved in his case, so he tries to find out his phone number. However, when the guy is about to leave, Chun-ho quickly takes out his phone and dials the same number, 48 to 85. The phone rings in the guy's pocket. He immediately decides to run away, throwing his cell phone away on the way. Although the man is confused, he decides to pursue him to the end and, using his old skills, catches up with him, knocks him down, and starts beating him to find out where he currently lives. Because, according to his documents, although his name is Chi Yang-ming, he lives in a completely different city and does not intend to reveal his current place of residence. He then handcuffs the criminal and returns to the scene of the accident, where a police officer suddenly appears and, noticing the injured guy in the passenger seat, asks the driver if he has a police ID, allowing him to handcuff civilians. And, since it is missing, he will have to go to the police station with them. But even on the way, he does not calm down and shouts that just 2 years ago he was a police officer and that the real seller of his girls is sitting next to him. To prove his point, he tries to call his friend from the police, but he does not answer the call. Therefore, the police take Chi Yang-min's side and ask him to write down the situation where Chun-ho can be charged on many counts. Meanwhile, Detective Lee has already caught the man who threw secondary waste at the mayor and, putting him in the car, slowly begins to answer his missed calls.
차예요? 예? 차요? 예. 그거 아는 사람 차인데.
아는 사람 누구요?
Meanwhile, a small scene unfolds at the police station, where the police officers notice during a brief interrogation that Chi Yang-min is not telling the whole truth, because at first he replied that he did not have a phone, but when the police officer asked him what the first digits of his number were, he quickly answered without even thinking about his initial version of events. Moreover, when he began to pretend that he had forgotten who he borrowed the car from, it did not make a favorable impression. In the end, he claims that he did not sell the girls, but simply killed them. Let's return to Detective Lee. Chun-ho informs him that he is caught a notorious criminal who killed prostitutes, but the man began to claim that he had already killed 9 girls, thereby convincing the police that he was simply insane. However, Lee believes Chung-ho and immediately arrives at the station to introduce himself as a special agent and take Chi Yang-min with him. This causes a real quarrel at the station, but right in the middle of it, the police commissioner arrives and witnesses this nightmare. Noticing the beaten Chi Yang-min, he accuses the police officers not giving them a chance to speak because right now he is taking the suspect with him and handing him over to Detective Lee, ordering him to find out who beat him up. But the answer is not long in coming, because soon Chun-ho has to be restrained and asked to continue the case at the police station. Only when Lee realizes that he has not gotten into the car does he ask him to come to the office immediately after finishing his business, because his presence is mandatory. The man agrees, but now decides to inspect the car that Chi Yang-min was driving. Inside, he finds the car owner's documents and a set of keys that Chi Yang-min had dropped earlier. Detective Lee asks the criminal how he killed the girls, and the criminal replies without hesitation that he used a chisel, which matches the initial version, as all the girls were found early in the morning in an alley with head wounds. At this time, Chun-ho decides to check the official residence of Chi Yang-min and the owners of the car, but their housekeeper does not know this person, let alone a set of keys. Her employers left for a meeting late in the evening but have not yet returned, and it is possible that the salesman from the corner store saw them, so he immediately calls his partner and, handing him a map and a set of keys, orders him to search every house, not forgetting to try to break in to find a basement or semi-basement where the phone might not work. Meanwhile, he goes to the office and meets with a profiler who creates a profile of a criminal who could perfectly match Chi Yang-min's behavior and confirm his words. There is only one catch. If a civilian detains a person, it is necessary to obtain a warrant from the prosecutor within 12 hours, otherwise the person must be released. Chi Yang-min is changed and interrogated, where the guy tells everything in vivid detail.
왜 그렇게 죽였어? 목 되게 힘들어하더라고. 돼지 잡는 걸 보고 그렇게 했어요.
그리고 나서
벽에 걸어요.
뭘?
네?
뭘 거냐고.
목인 뭐예요, 개들이지.
그리고
발목 뒤에 있죠, 그 힘줄.
아킬레스건?
네. 거기를 칼로 따요.
죽은 애를?
네.
왜?
그래야 피가 빠지잖아요. 안 그러면 무거워서 못 들어요.
그렇지. 그래야 가벼워지지. 그래서 그 다음 어떻게 했어?
그렇게 하루 정도 놔두면요, 그 피랑 지저분한 게 저 빠지거든요. 그럼 토막 내고 묻는 거죠.
어디다?
네?
시체를 어디다 묻냐고.
그냥 뭐 여기저기.
여기저기 어디야? 구체적으로 말해봐.
그게
9이나 되는 사람을 집에다 묻었을 리는 없잖아.
아니 그 9 아닌데. 12인데.
At this time, Joong-ho was being interrogated by an officer who was not interested in his version of events, but only wanted answers to his questions. Insert Lee pulls Joong-ho into the next room, but first he has to leave his fingerprints. Joong-ho will need to head over to Min-jin's house to collect DNA samples and compare them with what they found on his shirt. Joong-ho looks at this slimy guy who is swallowing candy and doesn't believe the theory that he could have killed someone, so he decides to teach the scoundrel a lesson with a few slaps. Soon, following the operator's instructions, he and the police officer arrive at Min-jin's house and immediately decide to break the glass to get inside. But there, they find her daughter, who is already reporting the incident to the police. Joong-ho breaks in, takes the girl's phone, and hands it to the cops so he can call off backup while he figures out who this quiet little girl is. But after looking at the photos on the fridge, he realizes that Min-jin was hiding the fact that she has a small child. So, after collecting the DNA, he is forced to take the girl with him and feed her at the nearest restaurant, but since the girl turned out to be smarter than he expected and immediately understood that her mother was not at work and that the police officer was collecting her hair for DNA analysis, he takes her with him and asks his partner how his search is going, not forgetting to ask if he has any acquaintances who could look after the child. We instantly find ourselves at the police station, where the profiler and Detective Lee are reporting to the commissioner on the murder case, who has now started talking complete nonsense and has no adequate motive for the murders. And since their reputation is falling apart, the senior detective orders them to come up with something and finally achieve a resounding victory, otherwise their cases will be completely ruined. Joong-ho goes to the maniac's home address, where his older sister lives with her husband. She hasn't seen her younger brother in about 3 years and would rather not hear about him. But Joong-ho didn't come here to offer his condolences, but to sign a contract for them to return the money for the girls her brother sold. However, in the middle of the conversation, their child appears and immediately relieves himself. As it turns out, he is disabled. After learning his story, it turned out that it was Chi Yang-min who did this to the child, for which he was sent to prison, after which they never saw him again. At that time, the criminal was sitting in the police station with Detective Oh-eun-si, where he noticed some rather strange details.
머리는 이렇게 짧게 했어요? 길면 섹시할 것 같은데.
야.
예?
맞을래?
아니요. 향수 안 뿌렸네요. 생리하시나 봐. 냄새가 비린 게.
While bigwigs arrive at the station, and information floats around the hallway that this is not the first such incident, that he has been caught twice before but released due to lack of evidence, this time he plans to get away with it again. But the commissioner does not give up and, after consulting with his colleagues, realizes that there is nowhere to bury the bodies in their city except for one mountain, Sonmi, which they are going to comb through to find the bodies. Meanwhile, in the scary room, Min-jin finally began to come to her senses. Joong-ho continued his investigation using his not quite legal methods and discovered that the same situation was happening in another brothel. Girls started disappearing after getting calls from a number ending in 48 to 85, and their owners weren't even looking for them. The police continued their search even in the pouring rain, but Chun-ho did not give up either. Together with the owner of another brothel, he searched the logs for a number ending in 48 to 85. And, fortunately, one girl was found completely safe and sound. It turned out that the guy immediately made an impression of being abnormal, and when she got down to business, it turned out that his organ did not erect at all. He did not drink or use drugs that day. So she decided that he was simply impotent, took the money for him as for a regular order, and ran away. But he kept calling and begging her to live with him, and when she refused, he started sending her pictures of himself covered in blood with a knife in his hands. The little girl waiting in the car heard these words and realized that her mother was already dead, although in reality, the girl had already come to her senses and was horrified to see two bodies in front of her. Chun-ho's assistant makes a sudden discovery. One of the doors opens, and the boss immediately arrives at the scene, but they find nothing in the room. Just as they were leaving the room, a strange guy appeared, and they immediately rushed after him. Of course, they caught up with him, but if it weren't for Chun-ho, his partner would most likely have been killed by a brick that fell on his head. And for such pursuits, Chun-ho beat up the guy in his own room in an attempt to find out where Min-jin was, but he really didn't know anything, just shared that he was Chi-Yang-min's cellmate and helped him with housing. He lived with him for about 2 weeks, then disappeared and returned one night for his bag of tools without saying a word, but Chun-ho notices another detail. The walls of the room were covered with various drawings, but hidden under the wallpaper. His partner decided to get some sleep, asking the girl to wake him up if anyone came, but as soon as he fell asleep, the girl saw her mother, who had arrived by taxi and gone into an alley, so the little girl followed her. Chi-Yang-min is interrogated about his sexual relations with women. He puts forward the theory that all maniacs like him are impotent, and when he hammered a chisel into his victims' heads, it gave him at least some pleasure. After saying this, the suspect lunged at the officer, so the commissioner considered it a real success. Only Chun-ho had another setback. His partner lost track of the girl, and going to look for her, found her in an alley where she had eaten garbage. To save her, she had to be rushed to the hospital, where she was put on an IV and asked to sign papers as her father, even though during one of their lunches, the girl had told the man that her father worked in Rio de Janeiro and had never visited them. The commissioner orders a search of the area where the kidnapping may have taken place, enlisting the support of the townspeople, so everything should go quickly. Suddenly, there is a commotion upstairs. Chun-ho is beating up the maniac, who finally confesses where he buried the bodies of his previous victims. The police immediately rush to the scene and begin digging, but Chun-ho quickly realizes that they have been deceived and that the search is futile. The prosecutor arrives at the police station while the suspect is being transported, finds the guy in this state, and, dissatisfied, calls the commissioner into his office, ordering him to release Chi-Yang-min and bring him the person who did it. Therefore, a real scene unfolds at the construction site when Chung-ho's colleagues try to arrest him, while the victim has already managed to pry up the broken tile and is trying to cut the rope in every possible way. Chung-ho, of course, does not give up and beats up the driver, causing an accident, after which he beats up a couple of guys and asks one of the cops for help in unfastening his handcuffs and informing him that Chi-Yang-min has already been released from the police station. But not just like that, some officers followed him to track down where he was going, because Min-jin had already cut the rope and stood up, then quickly got out of the bathtub, broke the glass, and ran out into the street, where she saw former owner's dog feeding on the maniac's victims. Running out of the yard, she decided to run to the nearest store to call her boss, but he was so engrossed in running that he decided not to answer the phone, and she didn't wait for a response and passed out. Chi-Yang-min had already arrived in the area and was heading for the house, but he ran out of cigarettes, so he decided to go into the store, where he noticed an agitated old woman who told him that a maniac was on the loose and that his victim was hiding at her place, so she would be glad if he stayed with her. The guy agrees, of course, asks the shopkeeper for a hammer, and closes the shop for a temporary break. Chun-ho runs up to the red Matisse and doesn't know which way to go. At this time, Chi-Yang-min gets rid of the shop owner and asks Min-jin how she managed to escape, and when she doesn't answer, he starts beating her with a hammer until the girl, without resisting, sees her beloved daughter for the last time. Chun-ho didn't know what to do until he saw the police rushing toward the store where Detective Lee was already waiting. Chun-ho understood everything from Lee's expression. After what he had been through, he visited the girl and asked his colleague to look after her because the case was not over yet. Chi-Yang-min remained at large and admired the dismembered body in his aquarium. The police were already on high alert when Chun-ho decided to visit the very shop where Min-jin had been killed. On top of everything else, he had only just noticed the message she had left him, so he examined the blood-soaked room, listening to her voice. The maniac was already burying the bodies in the backyard, deciding to get rid of the dog at the same time. Walking around the local area, Chun-ho stumbles upon a church where he sees a crucified Jesus whose feet he had seen in the drawings from the room. Inside, he meets one of the priests and, after asking about Chi Yang-min, learns an interesting fact. The guy worked for them 6 months ago and managed to make the cross that hangs on the street with his own hands. His boss was Mr. Don Won Pang, so Chun-ho quickly finds himself near his house. Only this time, he decided not to call, but to sneak inside unnoticed, since he still had the keys. On the path, he encountered the maniac, whom he kindly invited into the house for a brief conversation, during which he noticed Min Jin's head in the aquarium. However, it was too late. The maniac had already escaped his grasp and struck him with a club, but he was unable to maintain his lead for long. During the fight, the men broke the aquarium and knocked Min Jin's head onto the ground. After that, Chun-ho almost lost when the villain began to beat him with the first statue he could find, but in the end, he struck him with a hammer, and when he was about to finish him off, the police arrived and were able to stop him. During this time, Chun-ho lay on the ground and looked straight into the eyes of Min Jin, whom he had not managed to save. After these events, the police finally found the bodies of all 12 victims, as well as the body parts that the maniac had managed to separate from the bodies. At the end of the film, Chun-ho finally returns to the sleeping girl and silently sits down next to her, thinking about protecting her for the rest of his life because that would be fair to her late mother.